Good morning. Welcome to day 69 of Project Dig. Thanks for joining. Project Dig is a 2D multiplayer automation survival sandbox game that I am developing entirely here on Twitch and uploading all the VODs to YouTube. And we're going to do something kind of different today, which is actually work on something somewhat gameplay related. That's Tilemaps. The tilemap is like, what the tiles that are being rendered to show the world. There's kind of like two different ways you can go about doing that. Well, there's like actual tile maps where it's the tiles, or there's like should probably looked up the name, where you're creating the bounding boxes, transforming it. I don't know what it's actually called. But that actually kind of requires a real physics system, and I don't think I'm going to be doing that. So, yeah, I was thinking we could work on the tile map since we're done with scripting support. Hey there, Richard. Welcome. Coffee. The tile map is just like all of the blocks that are representing the world. Hey, David. Welcome. So I haven't actually really thought about this. I was struggling to come up with something we should work on today, and I saw Tilemaps. I'm like, you know what? We can work on that. We're getting close to being able to start focusing more on gameplay stuff. And I need to do research, honestly, on physics. I need to do research. I've been struggling off stream to get things done. Struggling. I think it's like I'm busy, and also whenever I'm streaming, I'm in like full work mode, and whenever I'm not streaming, I'm oftentimes not working, and I think that's making it actually kind of harder for me to get work done whenever I'm not streaming, which is good and bad. There we go. Looking for the right one. There, we're done with the UI, we're done with scripting support. I think that's all good. Going to show you what the tile maps look like in Korea. Hey David, you ended up buying Korea yesterday. I figured it works on Mac too, and I really like the graphics and story of the game. But for some reason, the game doesn't work well. The graphics are doing some very strange things. Have you tried changing the graphic settings? Did I take a screenshot? Sure. It's probably the, I know that for some GPUs, or yeah, some of the shaders don't work well, and so you have to play around with that. And I know that I've seen it reported on Mac a few times. But I think it's possible to work around it by changing the settings. But I can look at it regardless. I mean, it should work. Yeah, I've actually honestly, partly because of that, thought about just taking off the Mac support entirely. Um, yeah, it does have some issue. It's like what happened is that the game worked well on older Macs, but Mac doesn't try to, or I should say, Apple doesn't try to support backwards compatibility like Windows. And over the years, they have kind of just phased out their old stuff. And they're much more aggressive about that than Windows. And I just haven't been able to keep up. And it's hard for me to justify keeping up when it's like 2% of the profits or whatever. And it would take me like probably weeks to fix the issues, if not months. And so yeah, I'm like, it's just not worth it. It works for most people, but there's like, I don't know, maybe 10% of people it doesn't work for well on Mac. So it's like, you know, 0.2% of people who buy Korea or whatever, which is still significant. Which is why I've kind of honestly thought about removing the Mac support, and maybe I will. Before this next update if I can't get those issues fixed. I'll look at the bigger ones though. Okay, so anyways, tile layer, there we go. So we have this tile layer. Dang, yeah. Ugly interface. There has to be a better way to try to do this. Okay, so yeah, our tile layer is basically a tile map. And so the idea is that a world or realm and creates a realm has a tile map or possibly multiple tile maps, tile layers. It's anonymous. And yeah, there's multiple tile layers, and you can manipulate it with the like get tiles, or there's somewhere down here set tile, I believe. I guess it's just being able, you can get the tile itself here, get tile, and then change it. That's probably how you manipulate it. It's been a while. There's also this concept of foliage, which we should probably think about. And then rendering, and that's actually one of the biggest challenges is rendering it. So if we look at it from a data standpoint, what does this look like? It looks like a huge vector of data. If we look segments, segment tile vertices. No, that's not it. Damage tiles. Where are the tiles? Changed. Segments and vertices. Oh, regions. There we go. So there's a tile region. A region has a yeah, that's right. It's a vector of vectors. So it's a vector of regions, and each region has a tile list, and the tile list is just the vector of tiles. And here's what we have for tiles, which is try to keep it as small as possible. Tile ID, foliage ID, the frame, the foliage frame, and the priority. What theme do I use for Visual Studio? It's my own custom one. I can share you a link. Is it that one? Yes. There you go. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, no problem. So that's kind of how the data structure looks like. It's a vector of regions, a vector of tiles, and then the tiles contain the tile data, as well as like the foliage and whatnot. Here's the tile priority. We have priority here. So I did some cool things I like about it. Maybe we should take some notes, like what we need to actually have this all doing. It's pretty large. Anyways, so what's our features? We obviously need to be able to display tiles, display and manipulate tiles. I don't know about the tile. You know, one thing we could maybe do or consider is what if a tile layer was a world component? That might make sense. Definitely considering that. The thing I like about that is then for multi-threading, it would be kind of easier to rationalize that and like figure out how it should be handled. So world component is this component that the world owns instead of entities, and there's always going to be exactly one of them. So what we would need to do is we could make it so that the world component contains a list or map or something, or maybe it's just properties, but it's like, you know, it could be something like world.tiles or world get component world, or maybe it would be like tilemap component, tilemaps plural component. So that would be our world, and then we could do something on it like you know, oh, let's get the ground layer. or the background, whatever. So that's a possibility. Another way we could do it would be to do something similar, but instead of that, we would say ground tile map. Component. So each one would be its own component. The thing that's not great about that is it means that you have to create a new one for each one, which kind of feels weird, but it might be good. I guess one thing that's nice about that is then for our whole like multi-threading, we would only have to lock on specifically the tiles that we are using. But then again, that might we might always want to lock on all tiles, because I imagine that, or I should say tile maps. I imagine that whenever we are manipulating a tile map, there's the possibility to manipulate any of the tile maps. I imagine ground is the most popular one, but still, whoops. Yeah. So it might be best to do something like that. Yeah. Okay, what other features are we looking at here? What do we need to do? Display and manipulate tiles. We should probably pick these up, huh? So display tiles. So store the tile data, display, like, so we probably should actually, so like, if we're following this model, which we probably should, then the component would be storing, like, we would have the component store the tile data. We would have a layer or like a function that displays all the tiles. Have you seen that video by the Destiny dev of how they did multi-threading in their engine? No, I'm not. Yeah, avoid using locks. Yeah, well, so I think with the system I'm planning to do, if yeah, like, well, I don't know to what degree we need to do the multi-threading, but what I currently have planned is a way in which I don't think we will need locks. Yeah, I'll definitely watch it though. It sounds interesting. Open a new tab. Let's pause this. Speaking of watching GDC talks, I watched this really good talk a few days ago. Called, what was it? Making Path of Exile to be played forever. Designing, that's it. Designing it to be, here we go. Copy link address. So yeah, the title of the talk is Designing Path of Exile to be played forever. My brother is like currently obsessed with Path of Exile. He started League a few weeks ago and he's probably sunk like 200 hours into it already. So he talks about all the time, but he mentioned this talk, and I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I'm like, that sounds like a GDC talk. And I looked up, it's like, yep, GDC talk. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. And the way that they basically, like, half of the talk is the developer, Chris Wilson. He talks about how he was able to kind of turn around Path of Exile. It had a decline in the player numbers, but they figured out the right cadence for their releases, their updates, and the seasons, and it has become very, very popular. But yeah, that was really interesting because I struggled with that for Korea's development, and I was like, okay, that's really interesting. I don't know exactly how applicable it is to like Korea or the games I'm making, but it's still interesting. I think there's like some bits to take away from it for sure. But yeah, I'll check out that multi-threading. But yeah, I have some ideas thanks to T-Lock, who is a viewer on occasion. And basically the idea is that we'll have, this is a little off topic, but it's okay. We'll have our scheduler that is, running this update. So it schedules things. Right now it's not really doing much for the scheduling, but then it updates. And so if we go to our game, we create a scheduler, we add it, and then we tell it to schedule. And so how that looks right now is it will, whenever we, let's see here, schedule, yeah, it's right here. Whenever we are scheduling the systems within our scheduler, it's calling the schedule function that is passed in. And so a schedule function looks something like physics schedule, where it says, hey, this scheduler, like it gets passed in the schedule and it says, hey, this is writing to the transform component and the physics component. And so it knows it's writing to them. Here, this physics entity manifold system is writing to this world component and then reading from these two components. So we know which components are being read and which components are being written to, and all of the data lives within components. So what that means is that if we actually know what's using what, then we technically can schedule it in a way that they are not overlapping. And so like we can have one system that's running using this set of components, and we will do like the single read single write multiple read. I forget what that's called. Multiple readers, single writer, I don't know, whatever that design is called. So we can have lots of systems reading a single component, but only one system can be writing to that component. And so with that, then that means that we never have to worry about multi-threading within our systems. We only have to worry about the multi-threading for the systems themselves, like on the top level in the scheduler. So this is the only place that we'll need to worry about them. Well, not actually that. This is where we figure out how they should run. And then in update, this is where it will actually be doing the multi-threading, essentially, where it will have a pool of threads that it can be invoking, and it will know like how many writers are using a component and how many readers are, and kind of be handling that. So yeah, that's how it will eventually work. Right now, we're not doing any multi-threading. Within our systems, we are doing multi-threading for our disk IO, and I think that's it. I guess like technically there's threads being spawned for some of the libraries that we're using, like BGFX is doing its own rendering thread, and Fmod, I believe it now has its own thread as well for the audio. But yeah, so that's how we will do the multi-threading in our engine. So yeah, you can see in here there's lots of like locks. But it's because I did not design Korea to do multi-threading. I actually made the decision early on, I'm not going to do multi-threading because it's really complicated and I'm making a simple hobby project. I don't need to worry about multi-threading. Ha ha ha. Joke's on me. I ended up making a much bigger game, and those lots of bad designs kind of piled up, which made it so I didn't need to worry about the performance. And then I had to do things like add in threading to my tile layer, and I tried to do it as cheaply as I could, which you can see looks pretty horrible as far as the interface goes. Whereas like, what I did is I tried to multi-thread my more complex system. So like the lighting system is multi-threaded, but in order to do that, I needed to have access to the tile layer, which wasn't multi-threaded, so I needed to add in support for that as well. Yeah. So anyways, we should probably, at first I was thinking, oh yeah, we'll just do something like a tile map. But we actually should be following more along the lines of our ECS. While we don't have an entity here, well, we can think of our entity as our world. And so our world is the entity, and so each world has its own unique ID, and then so it's a WCS. It's not ECS, it's WCS. So then we have our component that is going to contain all of the data. And then we will have a system that is acting upon that. And then I'll probably also, I don't know exactly how I want to do some other things. We'll have to think about that. Like, what if you want to destroy a block? How does that look? And there's some features that are not features, like actions that are commonly used. And that's something that I haven't quite figured out because we haven't really needed to do that very much in our game engine. But how do you perform something like, hey, let's destroy a block on this layer or on this tile map? Yeah, and then we can do something like, where's that, entity layers? Yeah, there we go. With rendering. So we'll have like a draw tile map system or something, or yeah, where it like, I need to figure out exactly how that's going to work with like queuing up all of the layers that need to be rendered. But somewhere we'll say, hey, we need to push back a new render layer. Here's our function that needs to be called. Like, so this is the draw spine entities, or here we have the draw entities, which is up over here. And that's where we actually are drawing our entities. So similarly, we need a draw tile map, which will draw out our tile map for us. Unfortunately, drawing a tile map is very complicated, and we'll have to put some serious thought into how we want to do that. One second. So yeah, we need to store the tile data, display the tiles, manipulate, oh my gosh, manipulate the tiles. This is the tricky one. I don't know how to do that. Yeah, I don't really know what our system is doing yet. I don't know if it's really feature. I don't know if that's the right word for this. So I had foliage in here. Foliage. Whoops. Foliage. There we go. I don't think we want to do foliage like in our tile map, like what I did for Korea, but maybe we can do something kind of similar. Like, I'm thinking that the foliage would just be a separate tile map, honestly. Okay. Overlaps, damage tile. Oh yeah, there's the concept of like handling damage tile. Which is kind of like manipulating. Um, just had an interesting idea. I saw that there's the multiplayer stuff, and I was thinking like, I wonder if I could try to do like a memory delta, like what I did for the hot reloading with the entity components. That was pretty interesting. And then I thought maybe I can do that for the entity components as well. Like, so instead of tracking what data has changed on the entity level, what if I just track the data, like the binary data, and it's like, oh hey, this chunk of memory changed for this component pool or whatever. Let's sync that up. Might be interesting. Same with this, because we do have to somehow track what has changed in our tile map and share that. Ah yes, there's the onChange. I think that will happen with the manipulate data. So we need like a changed event. One thing I did for the tile layer in Kriya is I made it so it was dynamically loadable, and that's why I have this tile region stuff. Is like each region can be loaded and unloaded, and you don't know if it's actually entirely loaded. I'm going to get rid of that 100%. It's either loaded, the world is loaded, or it's not. There's no like Schrodinger's tile region where it's like, does it exist or not? You don't know until you see it. So that might be it. Copy to has segments, is solid, is empty. Those are just like helper functions really to look at the data. They'll probably need like a maybe like a namespace or something for this like tile map helper functions. Like maybe for those, what we could do is something like maybe even like tilemap. So this is a namespace tilemap. What was it? Is solid could be a function. Is solid. And we would pass in either the world, I guess we would have to pass in like the world and the tile component, or the type. Maybe it'd be tile map types dot, or layers, tile maps ground. I don't know. Maybe just tile map dot ground. And then the position. Once I do that, I don't know how to get out of here. It's so weird that they do that. I don't know how to leave. Anyways, I don't really want to. But yeah, so like we could do something like that. It's a little verbose. I guess one possibility is that we could get the component at that point already. Maybe that would be best. So we'd have it. I didn't know you could do that. That's kind of cool. Let's actually, while we're at it, let's just put that in here. Whoops. Okay. Not like that. And we'll try this. Okay. So what I was thinking is another way we could do it is do something like we get the component. I guess it would, yeah, just be one of these. So we could say ground. Whatever. Something about the ground component. One of these two. And then we could just put in here ground. So that could work. Kind of like that more. So you're expected to pass in that, like the component or something, like maybe the tile maps component contains a vector of components that's made from the list of tile map types that we have created. And so instead of dot ground, you would say like tile map dot ground, like that. Just trying to like come up with a good position, a good syntax for this. I kind of like this. So that's what it would like look like typically, something along those lines. That's pretty nice. Tile map is solid, ground position. So that's for manipulating the data and also getting information on it. Like that's just a helper function. I guess that's a good question, is like how useful is this? We'd have to look like what is solid actually doing. I know like that's used a lot, or like is empty is another one that we would have. Stuff like that. Render tile. So you guys want to see some super complex code? Like really crazy complex. Our render function for the tile layer. So this is the Kriya code. Crazy. So first of all, we figure out the viewport, like what tiles are we able to see on screen at that moment. And then we say, hey, if the lighting is currently working, like it's calculating the lighting, that it has a thread, so they kind of work together. Then we let the lighting finish before we try to render the render component. Otherwise, if it hasn't already begun, if the lighting hasn't begun, then it uses the lighting from the previous frame. So it's like, if it's not doing anything, then we use the previous lighting. If it's currently calculating the new lighting, then we wait for that. I think that's right. And then things start to get a little crazy. We calculate the actual the segments that we are showing. That's how we kind of group things up. So it's like we have we have a tile region. So there's the entire tile layer or world, and then we have that split up into regions, and then that's kind of split up into segments, and then we have the individual tiles. And so a region is like, well, the entire world can vary, but it's usually like what is it, 4096 by 1536. And then we have our segments, or sorry, our regions, which are I believe 256 by 256, and so this is all within tiles. So 256 tiles by 256 tiles. That's our region. Actually, sorry, for the tile regions, it's the entire vertical slice. So it's 256 tiles wide by 1536 tiles tall. And then we have our segments, which are finely squares. Those are 250, oh sorry, no. They're 16 by 16 tiles. And so we figure out like, okay, what we can see within, or as far as segments go, like what's the topmost segment, what's the bottommost segment, and try to render all of those. And so we kind of iterate through all of those segments, calculating which ones they are. We get like the true segments since we support world wrapping. And then we calculate the segment vertices. And so what we're actually doing here is we calculate the vertices for the tiles, and we have like a pool of, so we have all of this tiles within the segment, and then we split it up by the different types of tiles that are going into that. So we say, hey, we have some dirt, let's add that to the dirt vertices within this segment. And if we have some stone, then we use that, put that in its own thing. Yeah, so we iterate through all of the tiles within the segment. If it's empty, we skip it. Otherwise, we get the tile component information and the foliage component for it. And then we start looking at all of the neighboring tiles. And so we're trying to, and this is actually one thing that I think looked really nice for Korea and like much better than most games, which is that I supported this like concept of priority and bleeding between the tiles. So it would look at all of the neighbors for every single tile and figure out what's that tile. Is there some priority happening here? Where you might have one tile that, like if you have some stone and some adamantite, there's going to be some priority happening there, and you'll have it so it kind of bleeds. Unfortunately, I would have to run Korea to show you what that looks like, but I can show you. Actually, maybe I can just run Korea really quick. That's the easiest way. We'll let that load up. So yeah, it calculates the priority for those, so it knows which one should be rendered on top and which one should be rendered underneath. Then also, we have like a little border that will need to be rendered as well, because they are the way that the tile's set up. it's like it takes two draws or two sets of vertices really. So let's find. So this is Korea, my previous game. So you can see kind of like if you look up over here or over here, you can see it has like a nice little border on it. It's like all kind of like choppy. If I zoom in, it'll be even easier to see. Let's do that. So you can see the border along here or over here. There's like little cracks and whatnot. So that's actually, I achieved that with this priority thing. And so I tried to figure out like what's the priority. You know, we need this to be consistent. And also sometimes we want certain blocks to like overpower other blocks or whatever. So you can see this one over here. And then also it has like the nice little edges. Looking around for some more. Yeah, here you can see that these are kind of like blended together. And you can even like, and I kind of wish we did a slightly better job on this, but sometimes they'll have like holes in them, so you can even see them like kind of bleed together. So it's not like, it's not a straight line. And sometimes they'll have like, yeah, holes, so that way they actually look like they're kind of connected a little bit. But anyways, I thought that was really cool, and I like that, and I would like to do that again. It helps make it feel a little bit more organic, and I think especially with projectDIG, where we are wanting to have larger tiles, it will be even more noticeable if we didn't do something like that. So like a game that doesn't do that looks like, well, Terraria is one. Images. So let me find an actual like. But you know what? I think they actually maybe changed it kind of. Oh, maybe they changed it. Or they did. Maybe it's certain blocks do it. I know like the ores won't do it. Or at least they didn't. So like if you have like, maybe we can look for like Terraria adamantite, or let's see if we can find. So like you can see whenever they're touching how they're like super separated. I don't, maybe that was an intentional thing that he wanted. That's Stardew Valley. Yeah. So sometimes it blends nicely and other times not so much. They may have changed it. I haven't played Terraria in a long time. Or another game, what was that? Steam World Dig. That has like a very clear separation of the tiles. Looks like this. So you can see like they kind of blur things together a little bit, but not too much. Like there's a pretty crisp line between the blocks. And yeah, I don't like that too much. It might be better in some places. I don't know. I haven't played that in a while as well. I was looking to see if they had. They don't have a ton of different types of blocks. The game. That game was fun though. I liked it. So there's also oxygen not included. I haven't paid attention to what their blocks look like. They have a pretty clear line as well. I mean, it's very clear. Like, yeah. I wonder if there's any sort of priority system happening there. there might be a slightly easier way to do it than what I had done for Korea. But anyways, I thought that was cool. I liked it. Maybe we can come up with an even better solution. So yeah, it's just calculating all the neighbors to figure out like what exact frames it should be using, or like the regions. Let's see here. I can just show you mods core tile. We can look at any of these. Like here's our clay. So we can see it has this like crisp line. On the edge. That's because that means that it's like looping, so it's going to loop with another tile. And then if it has an edge, it looks like, you know, that slightly darker edge. So it's just kind of trying to figure that out. And then also it like, I think this is for it. I think that's if it's has an empty neighbor, and if it's trying to bleed, this is what it looks like, where it's like, oh hey, there's like a piece of dirt on this other side, so it's looping, but we are going to, you know, put this little cap here on the edge or something like that. Yeah. How come you decided not to use Unity then? Because I figured it would be faster to do my own engine, honestly. Because I'm sure before you went to Sweden, you were debating the idea. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I considered using Unity heavily. I need to make a like small little video on exactly why I decided against it, but the sum of it is just quick version is that it would be faster for me to do my own engine than use Unity, and I think that is proving to be true. So that's good. It's like, yeah, I need to add in support for stuff like this. Also, how come no 3D this time? I'm not super interested in 3D. And I don't think that 3D would work for this game, honestly. For this concept. I mean, it kind of would. It would be a very different game. And it would be maybe harder to design. But also, I just don't have the skills for it. And yeah. I just don't want to do that. So, just not super interested in it. So anyways, continuing on, like we finally select which frame we're going to use, and then we end up adding the tile vertices based off of that frame. And so this is all calculating just a single a single tile and what it should look like. When we finally get down to, yeah, here's where it's trying to blend the neighbor. And if we have foliage, we need to do something kind of similar. And then finally, what does this do? If we don't have that segment ID in the list of segments, then we add that segment vertices to the list. So then whenever we finally render it, here we go through, that's like setting up the rendering. And then here we actually render it. I forget why we do this exactly. Oh, that's right. It's because this is calculating all of the vertices, but we want to do multiple passes on the tile layers, so like rendering it. Like doing illumination and whatnot. So we sort the tile vertices, and then we actually go through and render all of them. It's a lot of work just to be able to render the tiles. Like all of this, let's see here. All of that. So it's like 400 lines of code to be able to render the tiles. Yeah, so it's a lot. I think we can close that for now. Okay, so yeah, we need to be able to store the tile data, display the tiles, that's basically our rendering thing, manipulate it. I don't know if we're going to actually have any systems that work directly on it. Well, it's more of like, we'll have systems doing other things. We don't have, I don't think we have a huge update function inside of this, do we? Update frames, here's an update function, what does that do? Ah, yes. This is where it restores the tiles if they've been damaged. So maybe we could do that, or yeah, we could have a system for that, but that would be separate. So we would have a system which is like, you know, handling the damaged tiles, restoring their life, so that way, you know, we don't have to persist that data forever. We also have our tile manager, or tile, is it tile system? No. Layer manager, that's what I called it. I don't ask. That's what actually contains all of the layers. I don't really like this design anymore. Need a better laptop, it's crashing. RIP. I had some problems with my desktop not long ago. Here's the update function. It just calls update on the layers, so that's not super interesting. This is mostly, this design sucked. You know, this was back when I'm like, everything needs a manager or a system. Yeah, let's not do that. Is this game going to be cross-platform? projectDIG? Not really. I mean, kind of. So right now, I'm only building on Windows and I'm focusing on Windows. Technically, it should be cross-platform because I am not doing anything platform specific. If I recall correctly, I don't think so. And all of the libraries I am using are cross-platform. So it should be good. You know, we can look at this and see like SDL is definitely cross-platform, BGFX is, Fmod is, Spine is, game networking sockets is, Soul 3 is, yeah, everything is cross-platform. I remember cross-platform caused you headaches, yes. Still is. Where earlier today someone was talking about how they just bought Cree on Mac and it wasn't working well. Like, I know. I hate that I know that, but I do. yeah, it's just not worth it. The sales percentage is not worth it whenever it's a small game. So the plan is for Project Dig and basically all of my future games is target Windows, which is like 92% of the player base on computers. If that goes well, then we can, the easiest port will probably be to Mac and Linux. So we can, consider that. If or we could at least like play around with it, see how hard it would truly be to port it over. And then also look at porting to consoles. And so, yeah. Didn't it generate enough funds to bring a few others on board to fix the issues? Korea? Nah, not really. Not really. Korea did okay, but it suffered from a lot of, like, as in to fund a team. No, definitely not. Like, I tried, but there was oftentimes where I was paying someone during Korea's development. Like, I would hire someone and I didn't have a ton of money, so I'm like, okay, I'll pay you like $2,000 or like, I think at one point I was paying someone 2.5K a month, which is like not amazing. It's probably like $12 or $13 an hour if they're working 40 hours a week. But then it was also like, hey, you also will get like 10% of the profits. And so it was like, it was okay, for a programmer. It's not great at all. But, there's some incentive with the profit sharing. And also is like, hey, here's a chance if anyone wants to be an indie dev. But then, like, the game was making on Steam, like, 3K a month or something. It's like, I was, like, maybe getting, like, there was many months, like, probably more like a year or two, where I was getting, like, around $500 to $1,000 from Korea, and I was paying someone like more than twice that amount to be working on Korea. And so it's just like, and then oftentimes they were doing like half the work I was doing. I'm like, why am I getting paid like half of what I'm paying someone else to work on Korea, and they're doing half the amount of work because I'm like busting my butt to try to get it to the finish line. And yeah, I eventually was like, you know what, it's just not worth hiring people to do that. It doesn't make sense. So I like, well, usually I wouldn't fire someone or like let someone go, whatever you want to say, until they screwed up. And like, I had a pretty simple rule. Hey, just like communicate often, work on the game, and you're good. But every single time someone would just like disappear for like a week or two, like they would stop, go radio silent. And I'm like, that's not cool. We have a game that's on Steam that we're releasing updates like every few weeks, and then you disappear for more than half of that release cycle. If I can't count on you, then that's like, why am I paying you money? So yeah, I would, at that point I would just be like, okay, obviously you're not invested enough in this game to justify me hiring you or continuing to pay you. And then the final guy, I mean, that kind of was the same thing, but also like Korea hit 1.0 and it wasn't going that great. So I'm like, you know what, let's, we hit 1.0, let's call it at that. But yeah, so Korea never did like super amazing at launch. 1.0, it did well enough that I considered hiring a team and I kind of looked at that. But then it kind of dropped off pretty quickly after 1.0 launch, and I'm glad I didn't. Is Korea still making money? Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it like, yeah, it's making money, fortunately. Is it making a lot of money? No. But it's making enough that we're not like, and whenever I say we, I mean my wife and I. I'm not super pressured to finish projectDIG next month or anything like that. So it's giving us some breathing room, and also we have savings. So yeah. Yep. So we kind of need to think about the tile layer stuff. Like, how is this all going to work together, or just work period? Um, so what I'm thinking is that we will have a somewhere a kind of like repository of all of the different tile data, and so we'll hand out uh, more or less a tile or a block type handle where we're like, hey, this is a dirt tile, and so it's, yeah, just an ID. So that way we can quickly look up what type of tile is what. The smaller we have that, the better. And so I'll probably be doing some bit fields or something with that. It'd be nice. So like, we can look at what I did for Korea. Tile. Where are you? Damage tile. Tile vector. Let's jump to here. So here's all the data for the tile. So we have 2 uint 16s and 3 uint 8s. But like, we can see here, we don't use a ton of data for the tile priority. Like, I'm pretty sure we could have made this a union or something. And then did some bit fields, kind of like what we do with our entity over here. So we say like, oh, you know, our priority only needs like 4 bits, right? For each direction. And our foliage frame, I don't know what those are. They probably only, like, that's how many, that's the frame. I don't know exactly what that is, like what's the range of data for that. And then also the tile ID and foliage ID, like honestly, we have like 512, like we can exceed a uint 8, but it wouldn't be that far over. It wouldn't be a uint 12. Definitely not a uint 16. We're not gonna have 65k different types of tiles. Honestly, we probably only have a uint 8 worth. So for Korea, we probably could cut down the amount of size that the tiles are taking up by like 16 bits, which, I mean, honestly, if I was smarter about it, I bet I could cut this down. So how many bits is this? This is 40, right? No, sorry, not 40. 56. I bet we could get this down to be less than, like, we might be able to do 32. We might be able to fit it in a uint 32, which would be crazy. Maybe. Kind of depends on what's in the frame. So like I know these could probably do uint 8, uint 8. So if it's 16, that'd mean that we would have 16 left for these. I know this is a 4. So that means we'd have 12 left between these two. So if each had 6, that would work. That'd probably fit. So yeah, we could do something like that. The reason why we actually really care about that, like packing it down as tightly as we can, is that we have a lot of these. How many? In a large world, we have 8,192 tiles wide by 1,536 tiles tall. So we have a total of, I think that's right, yeah, 12,582,912 tiles in the world. We do split it up by regions, so each region is 256. So that means that we have just shy of 40,000 tiles within a single region, and so that's what we're loading and unloading. That's a lot of data. If we say like, what is this? I think that since it's not being packed perfectly, it's actually more like 64 bits. So that's how many bits we have. And let's see here. I kind of forget the conversion. We need it. So there's, I guess it's bytes. So it's like really that's how many bytes are in it. And so kilobytes is 1024. Is that right? That seems kind of large. Doesn't KB. I feel like that's wrong. I don't know, maybe? That seems kind of large. I must be doing something wrong here. I don't think that a single region is 0.75 MB. That would be a lot, right? Oh wait, no it's not. Actually, that seems kind of small. Sorry. That seems off. I don't know. That's off. It takes up a lot of space, but that does seem wrong. Yeah, I'm doing something wrong there. But yeah, it ends up taking like, I think probably, maybe it's 7, maybe I'm off by like a factor of 10 or something. I think it's like 70 MB per region or something. That's about right, I believe. Yeah, I think that's about right. 70 MB per region. Would that be right? 70 times 64. No, that would be way too large. I don't know. It's still a lot. I mean, the bottom line is that it's a lot of data. It's a lot of data that we're packing. So yeah, we want to try to pack it as tightly as we can. One thing that I would like to add in support for that makes things a little trickier is animated tiles, because animated tiles would mean that it's changing regularly, and so we can't rely on doing exactly what I did for Korea, which is make it so that we only recalculate the segment vertices whenever that what is it? Whenever it changes. I guess what we could do is Hmm. Yeah, it's tricky. I was thinking that if we had our vertices that we calculate, because I do think we want to use our vertices, like calculate the vertices and try to reuse those, because calculating the vertices can be quite expensive. We'll definitely be able to optimize things a lot by reusing it all. Or not reusing it, what do I mean? By batching our tiles. So for Kriya, one thing I did originally was make it so it would render every single tile individually, which is very expensive. But if we were to batch things, like, we could, if I go back to here, you can see every single tile has its own image. If we grouped those together, we could save a ton of draws. Like, one thing we could do is look at, like, what are all the tiles, like, let's say that we're rendering a frame. One thing what we could do is look at all the different tiles that are on the screen at that moment and throw them into a texture and use that texture to render everything, and then we would only have to do a single draw call. And maybe what we would want to do is, like, I don't know exactly how this would work. It might be worth it, it might not. Maybe what would make sense is to, like, have the game analyze stuff and like generate these textures occasionally, or maybe we could, like, continue, like, to add on to it until it gets too big or whatever. I don't know. But the idea is that we could generate a texture that contains the tile data or the tile images, and then use that so we could submit, like, a single draw call for all of the tiles on the entire map, or maybe just 2 instead of 30 or whatever. And for Korea, I was submitting, let's say that our world, or not world, the screen is 1920 by 1080. Well, we probably actually need to do it more like this, huh? And so that looks right. We technically want to round up. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, so it's 8,100 tiles, and we probably want to render, like, a border around that, so it might end up being like over 10k tiles that we end up drawing every single frame, and that's how many draw calls I was making at one point for Korea. Of course, it was, like, way too slow and I had to fix it, but yeah, it would be a significant change from 10,000 to 1 or 10,000 to 2. Right now for Korea, it's 1 per type, I believe, and so it's not amazing, but it's like maybe 60 instead of 8,000 or 10,000, so it's a lot better. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we could get it even smaller. But in order to get it to be really small, like, well, we have this data and we're trying to reuse it from frame to frame, because it's expensive to calculate the vertices for the tiles. But if they're changing regularly, like we have animated tiles, then that means that we need a way to be able to update the vertices reliably. And I think, like, one thing we could do, so why it didn't work for Korea is that I didn't, like, really set things up nicely for that. I didn't really understand how to do it well, but maybe what we could do is have, like, a bunch of vertices, and then just let's say that a tile is empty, so we could have um it in segments, or I don't know exactly how we would want to do that. um I'm not sure what would be the best way to do that. Honestly, it might be possible to just optimize this without having as much complexity as I had. That's something that I did in Korea a lot. I remember the first time I wrote the lighting system, I made it so complex that it was actually I added in all of these like cool like tricks to make it faster, but those tricks actually had a greater cost than what it was to do it the simple brain dead way. And I think part of that is like I was using a lot of containers to try to do these tricks, and I didn't really understand the cost of like, oh, let's do a hash lookup for this thing. But we have like we're storing all this data and we're caching it and we're doing all this stuff, trying to be smart about it, but actually there's all this like hidden costs with the containers that I didn't really consider. Um, and maybe some more stuff. I don't remember. It was like 7 years ago now. 70% of the devs I know try to make it the best it can be. Just make it work and be simple. If it proves to a problem, refactor. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like what I've been going for, design wise. It's a little like sometimes you know it's going to be a problem, and you do want to try to avoid that, especially if it's going to be a huge rewrite. Like the optimal way is significantly different from the simple approach. But yeah, like what we might be able to do for rendering our tiles, or setting up this vertices, is to actually just iterate through all of the tiles that are on the screen and just put the vertices um into maybe like different draw calls. Like I do that with the yeah, maybe we could do that. We are doing batching with our render system right now. Game project. So if we go look at our render system, we have these draws. And so if we look at it, we can see like here's our draw sprite. And what we end up doing is we make sure that like it has a valid texture. Like we do some checks here. But ultimately what we end up doing is just adding in it by a group ID, which is a hash map, but we don't do a ton of lookups there. And so that's like the batching. So we just say like, hey, which batch does this sprite belong to? Let's add it in for the tile map or the tiles. We could do something similar where maybe what we do is we generate like 3 or 4 different textures that contain all of the tiles. And so they one texture might contain all of these. And then what we do is we just say, hey, which one does this belong to? Let's draw it with that texture and add it to our batch of tiles. And at that point, and then whenever we're done drawing all of the tiles, it then iterates through each sprite and draws the, or not each sprite, each batch of tiles, and generates a single draw call for that. So kind of like this vertex array is what we're going to end up doing. Might need to play around with that, or maybe we would generate the vertex array inside of our render function and call this. I forget how we are actually doing the vertex array down here. Vertices. So we actually go through all the vertices, which is kind of lame. We have to convert it over into something that it can handle. So it'd be kind of nice. I don't know, maybe it's not important or like not necessary, but it'd be kind of nice to not have to do that every single frame. Maybe we do. But yeah, if that's the simple way, and then we wouldn't have to worry about like, you know, the animating. We would just say, okay, we'll update all of the tiles that are being animated. That would mean that we would need some sort of, does it make an impact? Sorry, does what make an impact? This code here? I mean, what it's doing is it's having to actually, well, that's not so important. It's more of this, where we have to convert the vertices over into our vertex array over into these vertices, which is kind of like a vertex array, but specifically for BGFX. So like if we wanted to really optimize it, what we could do is instead of generating a vertex array that I have made, so this is the vertex data with the vertices, we could directly generate this stuff that gets passed in, the like vertex information that gets passed to BGFX, so we could avoid the middleman essentially. This is the middleman here. Just because this is like a lot more complicated and very render specific for BGFX, whereas our vertex array is much more generic and it doesn't rely, like we could easily replace this with something else, like, you know, SFML or whatever, and it would be fairly trivial since we do have this middleman. Gonna have a middleman of a middleman, because BGFX is a middleman as well. I don't know how much it affects performance. I don't think it's too bad, and we could always profile that if we needed to. So yeah, in that case, if we were doing something like that, you know, and we probably should try to keep it as simple as possible to start with, then we wouldn't, animating the tiles wouldn't be so bad, because it would just be a matter of seeing which tiles are being animated and updating the frames. So for animating tiles, like I was saying earlier, it's well, like if it's animated, that means it needs to know like which frame it's on and the animation time, like how long it has been on that frame. But that's expensive to do, which is why you see in a lot of games where they'll have like all of the tiles are being animated in sync, where it's like, oh, there's a flower dancing, and if you look, all of the flowers are dancing and at the same rate, which is kind of like, I think it looks bad, but we have gotten so used to it that it's almost like nostalgic or something. Like you're like, oh yeah, I like that. Like they're dancing in unison. You can avoid that by doing something like, I mean, you could do a lot of things. Let's say like you could say all tiles have the same animation rate, and then, you know, like 60 frames a second or something, because you don't need them to be animated super nicely. Usually it's just like slight movement that you want. So yeah, you could have it be 60 or maybe 100 frames or whatever, so it's just like 10 frames a second. I don't know what you would want. I haven't like done research on that. But anyways, that doesn't really matter too much. What you could do is have it so that the you have a if you wanted to not have them be synchronized. Or I guess let's forget about not having them be synchronized. The like way to do this is you would have a single thing tracking the time for all of the tiles. And if they're all the same frame rate, then that means that you would only have to, you would have like one system that's like, here's how long this current frame has lasted. Once this frame ends, we can update all of the tile, like the animated tiles, which I guess, I don't know exactly what we'd want to do for that. Probably what I would say is that whenever a tile is not on screen or not being rendered, it shouldn't be updated. So we only update the tiles that are being rendered. That makes sense. So then you'd have to go through the entire world. You're already iterating through them. So you could just say like, hey, let's get this tiles, the vertices, and oh, hey, it's animated and we have gone to the next frame. So let's, increment the frame for this tile and then get the vertices for that frame instead of, whatever the previous frame was. Couldn't you just make a sequence and then chop it based on the tick? Like delay each entity? Yeah, you could. Well, you have to store that somewhere. And so that's kind of what I was going to get at, is you could have some thing in there that like maybe whenever it comes on screen, you set it to, if it's animated, you set it to a random frame. So then a random animation frame. And so then you don't, like, it would of course then you'd have to know if it was already being shown or not. That is maybe a little tricky. Or even like, I guess if you only are updating whenever it's being rendered, that probably would fix it as well. Because the tiles would be added, well, I guess it would be added in groups. Because I guess it depends on how you split it up. That might be the case, it might not. If you're moving fast enough, then it might add in a group of tiles and they would all be on the same frame. Or if you broke it up into groups like segments, like what I did for Korea, where we displayed the tiles in segments. I don't know if you need to do it with this system, but if you did do it that way, like one thing you could do is use the position of the tile, like the X offset or the Y offset, or maybe both, to determine which frame it could start on. Yeah. So you can know, that's one nice thing about having it be broken up into segments, is that's really easy to keep track of. It's like, hey, are we rendering this segment or not? Because that represents like 256 tiles, and so it's pretty easy to just be able to check that. And then if you're not, you can initialize that segment, and part of that initialization could be like, I guess, randomly setting the frame, or maybe setting it based off of the position within that segment. So it's like, oh, hey, this tile is 27, x27, y30. And so this is the frame it's going to start on. Like, that could be deterministic if you wanted it to be that way. But yeah, if you have the frame being set or initialized at some point, then that could either be random or based off of the position, and then they wouldn't be synchronized. The way to synchronize it would be that you have like a number that's ticking up, like, hey, we're on frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe it repeats at some interval. Probably, I guess the only thing that really matters in that case is probably you want it to be a multiple of the frame count typically. So let's say like most tiles could have like 8 frames, but maybe some you want to have up to 16. And so then what you could just do is say, okay, let's have this frame count that's outside of everything else, so it's not being stored on the tiles. It just is like every 100 milliseconds it's updating and it's incrementing the frame count. And then what you could do is have the frame of the individual tiles be based off of that frame count, where you could just say, hey, this frame is modular of the frame count, and or the current frame index, whatever you want to call it, and then that would actually synchronize them. So you could do it either way. If you wanted, yeah, so synchronizing them wouldn't be too hard if you wanted that. So it's like, yeah. I think that would look good for if you wanted a more retro looking game. If you wanted a game that was kind of not so retro looking, then like, you know, not Super Nintendo, not pixel art, but you still wanted frames, then you probably don't want them to be synchronized. Hey Cooler, how's it going? So yeah, that's cool. Kind of just playing around with this stuff. I think we could do animated tiles. I think that would help bring the world to life, especially since like in projectDIG, it's going to be so dead. Like we're not going to have a lot of animals if we have any. We're not going to have monsters, I don't think. We're not going to have people. So it's going to be a very empty world. And in order to bring it life, I think we need to animate things that might not necessarily be animated in games, such as the tiles, or having like the machines, the items in the world, those be animated. So like, and then also, you know, having the conveyor belts and everything, like, so it actually looks and feels alive even though it's not. Um, let's see here. Yeah, so I think we actually have a fairly good idea of how we want to go about doing all of this now, huh? I had no idea what I wanted to do when we started. It's been like almost 2 hours that I've just been talking about this, but it's looking good. It's looking good. Manipulate data, damaging tiles. So damaging tiles. Yeah. So okay. So let's kind of recap. How is this all going to look? I haven't decided on this yet. I kind of like this more because then we could just have this be an index into a vector of, like, I guess we'd probably want this to be like tiles. So we'd have the tile maps, or maybe we'd have it be like a map. Maps. I don't know, whatever, something like that. I kind of like this more. I don't like the individual, because then it would be easier to add in more. The one advantage, like I said earlier, is that if we did it this way, then we would be able to block or like have read and writes for those a little bit easier. But I honestly think that the majority of the systems, if they're interacting with a single component or a single layer, they're going to interact with both, or at least have the potential to. So yeah, I think we would prefer to do it like that. And this is much more extensible. Like if we decided to add in an extra layer, like maybe we want to do like foliage, or you know, we have the background or wall layer, whatever we want to call it. So yeah, we have all of our data is stored inside of our tilemaps component. And then if we want to manipulate the data, most of those will be in a tilemap namespace, just so that way it's like this nice little helper functions. Really all they're doing is like it's common, code that, yeah, like we probably use is solid and is empty like 100 times in Korea. It's a lot. And then we can just pass in, so this would be a tile map probably. So tile maps component contains a vector of tile maps indexed by the tile map enum. And so we would pass in a tile map by reference here. And most of them like is solid and is empty. Those would be const ref. And then the position. Manipulating the tile data could also happen in here. Like we could have a tile map, damage, ground, position, 5 or whatever that just says, hey, like deal 5 damage. And that's something that we could track. I guess that would probably go on the tile map as well. Like maybe our tile map itself would contain a so this would actually be an array, I think, based off of the size of the tile map, to be honest. Kind of like what we do for, if we go to our world component, we do that here, right? Yeah, the max world component ID, which is an array for all of the components. We would do something like that for our tile maps. So this would be inside of the tile maps component. We would have something like this where it's a tile map, maybe it's a tile map pointer, and the tile map component ID or max tile map ID. And so yeah, that would be an array. And then the tile map would contain a vector of all of the tiles. I don't know how we want to like specify the size of the tiles. I'm not sure about that. We probably want that to be dynamic though, or support it being dynamic. Like we might want to create a world that's, 2000 by 2000, or another world that's like 1000 by 1000 or whatever. I'm not sure. I don't think we want to have it be specified compile time though. Assuming it needs to be a vector, not an array. And what else? Yeah, it would also contain a list of all of the damage tiles, which would probably be a vector of a damage tile or whatever, which would contain the position along with the amount of damage it has. So that way we could just do a lookup. Animated tiles, I think the animated, we just have the frame, do what I talked about. That would be pretty easy. That's for the rendering, so that's kind of tight. Let's actually put that in here. Animated tiles. We're gonna have an update. So maybe what I should do is something more like this, where we could have component. Yeah, the component goes here. So that stores the tile data. We have the display tiles, which handles like the animated tiles. So that's really like the rendering. Maybe I should just say render tiles. Damage tiles, I think, so that's another, why is it not? So this is our systems would be handling, recover damaged tiles. There's something else though, right? Maybe growing foliage would be another thing, which we have. I don't know about foliage yet. We need to think about that. I honestly think it would be a separate tile map completely, but that's something we need to look at. Manipulating the data. So that would happen within systems, but probably like separate. And so that's being happens in various systems using the tile map namespace. Yeah, I like this. This is so much nicer. So this is kind of more of our like following our ECS. It's a WCS, as I said, a world component system. It has a nice clear distinction or like separation of data, logic, rendering, and then our ID is the world ID. So yeah, it's per world. So that's really simple. I feel like I'm forgetting something here. We do need to support saving and loading it, obviously. Yeah, the manipulation happens in various systems using the tilemap namespace. Yeah, so we could have another thing, which is like tilemap, set, ground, position, tile ID or whatever. I need to figure out like, how do we specify the tile ID? I'm not sure. And so that's something to figure out. Probably what would happen, and so this is actually important as well. So this is all for the world component. I'm gonna delete that because it's pretty obvious that's what's happening here. But we also have some other stuff, which is how about tiles themselves? So the tile map is cool and all, but we also have, so this is tile map. Design. I guess we'll just call it the design. But then we also need the tile design, tile like prefab design. Go ahead and convert that into a header 2, I think is what I had up here. So this, I thought, okay, yeah, we do slash bullet. Nice. Okay, cool. I need to get better with using this. So we have the tile prefab design. So that's actually like, how are we getting this tile data and using it to populate the tile map? Because, you know, let's say that we have an item in our inventory and we want to place it down onto the ground. How do we do that? If we want to generate the world and place down a tile, you know, or a group of tiles, how do we do that? Like, how do we tell it what the tile is, or like what tile we want to be using? And I think that's going to be with the tile IDs. if we go back to Korea, what we had over here is the tile ID. So this tile ID is how we look up like the information on the tile. What would be preferable is if this is a ID or an index into a vector of tiles. And we are using that to do like a lookup or something. That contains all the tile information. So I think what we might want to do is have like two different things here. We probably want the tile component itself, which contains a tile ID, and that might literally be all we want it to have. Hey, Mr. Penstein, what's up, man? How's it going? Contains a tile ID. So this is used for the entity ID. Yeah, I don't know if that's what we want to do exactly. So that would be like for an item, I'm thinking. Or am I? I'm pretty good. Just currently working on designing out tile maps for projectDIG. Yeah, doing pretty good though. How's the Grand Prix wishlist drama affecting you, if at all? It kind of sucks. I looked maybe a day ago. I can look again. I don't know. I think it probably hurts people more that don't have games released already or something. I don't know. So anyone who doesn't know, basically, so Steam is doing this thing for the summer sale where they have this Grand Prix and you can win games by being like, what is it? Increase your max points, earn points, and then you can eventually, random members of the top 3 teams win free games. Top 3 games awarded. Top 3 awarded games. Yeah, so I don't know exactly how that's working. But my understanding is that it's like based off of your wish list or something. What do I get? Yeah, so the top ranked item from their Steam wish. At random, yeah. Drivers from the top 3 teams on a given day will be selected at random to receive the top ranked item from their Steam wish list. This item must be available for sale rather than merely coming soon. And so be sure to rank the titles in your wish list and add any new ones you're interested in. So it's a top ranked, so it's the top one. I don't completely get that. At the end of the entire, we'll award a bunch of games. Yeah, so they're awarding games based off of your wish list. And so people are like changing their wish list and like removing games that they might not want or whatever. And so a lot of indies are seeing like a huge decline in their wish list because people are adding all the most expensive games to the wish list because they want the free games. You know, like why would you want a like $8 game, you know, like Korea, which is $7.50 or something right now? Or would you rather have Cyberpunk or Octopath Traveler that are $60? It's like you're getting a free game regardless. So people are like removing a bunch of their wish list games that are like cheap, and trying to like, I don't know. It sounds like it's not random anymore. Maybe it's It used to be. I'm not sure. It makes it the top ranked item on your wish list. So I don't know, but yeah, I have definitely seen a large decrease. Like overall in the last or in the last week, there's been 1,000 wish lists that have been removed from Korea. That's a net. So there might be some people adding it, but there's 1,000 people, more than 1,000 people have removed it, which is a lot. I think typically though I have seen a decrease in the wish list because that's when people kind of prune their wish list anyways. But I think they're doing it a little bit more aggressively this time. But there may have been some confusion by users for sure. Okay, yeah. Because I heard some people on Twitter were saying that they have seen like massive decreases in their wish lists. Yeah. Have you bought any Steam games? Oh, I just realized my water bottle is kind of invisible. Right, let me look at that. Almost. It's a little interesting looking. Oh, it is invisible. Yeah, I guess I should have realized that. Right? If I put it over here, mostly. That's funny. No, I'm poor for the next few months. Sucks. I know how that is. Yeah, it was funny. A while ago, I had my friend visiting, and I took him to where I grew up. And we always talked about how we both grew up poor. And then he looks at me after I show him where I grew up, and he's like, "Okay, you win. You were definitely grew up poorer than I did." I'm like, "Oh yeah." um. Yeah, so tile component contains a tile data, a tile ID. I'm not really poor. I'm saving money. That's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm not buying any games either. But that's mostly because I have way too many games on my Steam library that I'm not playing, so I just can't justify buying new ones. I looked at Sekiro and I'm like, that looks tasty. Octopath Traveler, ooh, yeah. Yeah, I have hundreds I haven't played. Yeah, that's why I can't buy new games. I just can't. It's like the exact opposite problem I had when I was a kid. Like the exact opposite. I remember when and I'm sure a lot of people were like this, that are, my age or even older. It was like, I played Final Fantasy 7 probably 6 times over. I played Final Fantasy 8 probably like 3 or 4 times. I played Final Fantasy Tactics probably like 4 times over. I played Super Mario RPG probably like 15 times over. Um, I just played the same games over and over again because I didn't have other games. So it's like, oh, I finished this game. Which game do I want to go back to now? I would maybe get a new game twice a year, my birthday and Christmas, which are, like pretty evenly split. Time to start GDRRBSBWON. What's that? Dude, there was one summer when I was a kid, I did nothing but play Super Metroid every day. Nice. Games done really, really slowly because we're old now. Okay. Nice. Yeah, that's the follow up to SDDQ. Yeah, and so I just played the same games over and over again, and now it's like, oh, I have too many games, and I don't play them, and I can buy them. It's like, I think this is the case for many people where we did that. We didn't have the money to buy the games because they're expensive and everything, and now that we can buy the games, We don't really have the time. We're like living out our child fantasy of owning all of these games, but we don't actually play them. Um, and so yeah, I finally had to like, you know what, child me, you have enough games that you can play. You should play some of those. Yeah. Just got my driver's permit today and went out driving for the first time. Nice. Congrats. Dang, you are young. Or maybe you're just waiting to get your license like I did. I didn't get my license until I was like 25, 26. Maybe older. 27, I think. And my 18th birthday was yesterday. Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, driving is definitely scary. It is crazy that 16-year-olds are able to drive. Those giant metal death machines. Um, oh yeah, happy birthday. That's true. Happy birthday yesterday. Hope you had a good birthday. I mean, you got your permit. That must be exciting. Okay, so coming back to this. Going back to this. Sorry, we had quite the um little side thing going on. So tile components. I'm thinking that, let's say like an item might have a tile component, which, yeah, really, I think all I wanted to do is be able to reference tile data. I think. I don't know. Maybe we don't want to do it like that. Maybe it should contain more information. What program do you use to create sprites? I use GIMP typically, but if you're actually wanting to seriously get into sprites, I would recommend using Ace Sprite. Look, it's 25% off on Steam right now. I should actually buy that, honestly. Yeah, I would check this out. This is what all the like pros use. Yeah, so I would recommend this. I'm not gonna buy it right now, but I'm gonna add it to my cart because I should buy it. I saw that on stream, but I'm really bad at design. Yeah, so there's lots of tutorials that you can check out if you're wanting to do pixel art, but you should ask yourself if you seriously do want to do it. I think. What I had. Alright, there it is. Pixel art tutorials. So I would check out this here. It's a pretty good resource. That's if you want to learn how to do pixel art. If you don't, and there's a lot of other good resources online. Another guy that I like. Pedro Saint 11. This guy has a nice patron. He does some awesome work, and he does these nice tutorials. Like jumping. So yeah, check that guy out. So that's if you're wanting to get into pixel art. It does take a lot of time and effort. Also, one more plug, Pixel Dailies, or not really plug, mention. Pixel Dailies is a good like thing to give you something to do with your pixel art. So every single day they have a different theme. I guess today it looks like the theme is fancy. So yeah, just like top hats and canes. That looks really nice. I like that. I like this guy's stuff. I'm gonna follow that dude. But anyways, Pixel Dailies. So yeah, it takes a lot of time and effort to get good at pixel art, but yeah, if you want to do it, that's how I would recommend it. So I'm thinking, like, let's say we have an item, or we want to get the tile. That's I'm trying to figure out how we want to handle that. I'm not sure. Like, we could do something like what I did for Korea with the, like, we have a tile component, and maybe that contains all the data. Sounds good. So if we go to our tile component, we can see all the data that we have in there, and it's a lot. Because there's a lot of like possibilities. I think I just store the other definition. So here's all the like possible stuff that it has. It's like which layer this tile is associated with. So you can have different layers. I don't know what that dropped is for. Or that's the type of, yeah, that's right. That's the content or prefab ID, essentially, what it drops. So it could be like, hey, this drops a stone, and this is a stone block or whatever. Most of the time it drops itself. So like, a piece of dirt drops dirt. A stone drops stone. You know. But there's a few cases like a gold ore block drops a chunk of gold ore, so it's a different item. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. Bool, if it's simple, can pass things to this tile. So if it's solid, this does this tile support itself, or does it fall when a block underneath it is destroyed? I actually never had support for this in the game. Stable. That's something I just didn't do. Does this tile provide support for items to be placed onto it? So like you can say if it's, yeah, I don't even know if I use this, to be honest. Maybe, I'm not sure. Does this tile break when hit with weapons and the likes? Foliage, is this a foliage? Can it be replaced with another tile? Consume tile item on use. I don't even know what that is. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I don't really know what it's doing. There's like, you can associate the hit sound with it, break sound. There's a lot of data that gets associated with the tile component. But the silly thing is that we don't really need all of this, right? Like, this is static for each tile type. So we don't need lots of tile, yeah, we don't need a lot of tile component containing all this data. We just need like an ID that can look up this tile and like a database for the tiles. That's what I'm kind of thinking we could do. And that's why I was saying, hey, this could just contain a tile ID. So then let's say that you use an item, like you go to place it down, we're just like, okay, let's get the tile data for it. For this component. Like we do need to store at least the ID so we can look it up, but maybe that's all we need. And then also we have a tile ID, which on the tile map, so the tile map contains like these tiles, which has a tile ID for it to look up. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, so it could just look it up. Variant list. That's right, we had the variant. I think it also has like the frame. Oh no, that's on the animation component, I think, or something, right? Update time. Yeah, I don't remember what a lot of this stuff is. We have some objects that can be called or associated, like, I mean, not objects, events. So like, whenever it's damaged. This was pretty cool. I like this. Get on damage. So like, let's say you damage an entity or a block. In Kriya, you can actually specify the blocks. Like if I look up, if I go to tile, we can look in here. Here's an onCreate function. Let's not look at that though. Oh, that was something else actually. Here's a like ice on physics entity contact. So whenever someone steps on ice, if that entity is a player, then it actually like will deal damage to the ice after a while. So that way the ice breaks while you're standing on it. And so that's pretty cool that we can specify the logic in here. Honestly, that was added in pretty late, so we didn't use it extensively. It was like some newer things got it, but that's it. Kind of wish that we had more. Here's support for like custom placement logic where we check to see if you can actually place it. Oh, the ember moss is pretty cool. Whenever you step on it, it creates particles. Gives a little particle emitter. Physics contact. There's a few others, I'm pretty sure. Oh no. Physics entity contact. It's a trap. Don't know if we actually use some of these. It's funny how I have support for stuff that I never used. Mostly on physics entity contact is what I did. Yeah. It seems to be the like main one I used. But anyways, I supported other things like get on destroyed. So whenever you destroy a tile, you can actually have some event happen. Like maybe it's this dirt block with like a mine in it or a bomb, and so whenever you destroy it, it actually like creates an explosion. So you could do that, or like maybe for it, whenever you damage it, it has a chance to, you know, explode. And so it's like you're trying to like take the mine out or something. I don't know, I'm just coming up with some random example. So you're like trying to diffuse it by like damaging it and hoping it doesn't explode, and maybe, you know, it has a chance to explode while you're damaging it, and then if you destroy the tile before it explodes, then it doesn't trigger the explosion. I don't know. Just stuff like that. Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that we'll have it so that the tile component contains a tile ID, and that tile ID tile ID is used as an index to look up tile data. So if a tile data lives, and maybe tilemap namespace, or maybe we'll change it from tilemap to like tiles, or maybe even just tile. Like, do we need the map part? Tile is solid. I kind of like that. I think I like that in the tile namespace. So we could have like a tile get tile ID, and that returns tile data. I've been creating some tiles for my game. Nice. Are you using a sprite as well? I am not actually using it. So that needs to be loaded up somehow, somewhere. I'm kind of thinking we might want to do something similar to what we did for or what we're thinking of doing for our tile animation. Oh, sorry, not tile animation. Our animations period. I don't know if I want to just create like a .tile file or what. But yeah, so for animations, what I was thinking of doing, and I kind of have support for it now, is that we have this, right now this is hard-coded, but we basically create a animation file here, animations.dat file, that contains all the animation data. And so it's kind of like a database for specifically animations. So we could do something similar for the tiles. So it could be like a tiles.dat. And so that could be generated containing all of the tile data. And then we would just look up the tile. So there's a few things that we have to think about here. One is, how are we actually going to be laying out that data? Like, I don't want to put it inside of the tiles.dat directly. What we would want to do is have it in something that's very easily readable and editable, and then have our our asset pipeline go through and generate the tiles data file or something for us. That's one possibility. Another thing we could consider doing, since we're doing this for animations, we're doing it for tiles, maybe we want to do it for other things as well. Where it's like what we want to do is create this concept of like this database component, or like a singleton component, kind of, where it's for a prefab, we want to have something that is generated, but we are going to be using it in multiple sorry, what is it? It's like, it's data that we need to specify for the prefab, but it's static, which means that we don't need to replicate it for every single component. So we can move that out of the actual component and have it be in some database. So that's what we're kind of thinking about here. And so then we're looking up our animations, so we can look up like
a specific animation or the frame for an animation or whatever, and we're pulling out the data from here. So that way, if we go to our actual animation component, it's just a bunch of just data. Or it's like indexes into, it's kind of like IDs or whatever into the database. So we can look those up. And so I'm thinking we kind of want more or less the exact same thing for our tile data. Whoops, I meant to go here. So we could have a tile component that just has an ID, and then we would have that tile data that is in our database. And so I'm kind of thinking maybe what we could do is try to put the tile data in the actual component. Oh, sorry, not the component. Put the tile data in the prefab and maybe generate, either use pull out that data from the prefab, or another possibility is that we can put it in its own file. I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. In some ways, I feel like it should be separate. In other ways, I feel like it should be in the same file. I'm not sure. I am not sure about that. I guess one thing I should look at is like, if we are going, maybe I should look at the save file format for something like Sprite and see what they have. Let's see if, maybe the save file, I could have the asset pipeline read that save file and generate the output for us. I guess for the tiles though, that would be different. So animations, it kind of makes sense. Maybe tiles, maybe it should be in here. Maybe instead of doing like prefab.init, I could do like a tiles data or some tile data, and that takes a table that contains all of the information that we would be wanting. So this could be, let's see here. What does this contain? It's like the level. I don't think we need that in this case. Wall opacity. So like maybe the opacity. Or yeah, maybe we need a name. I'm not sure if we need that. I'm just like throwing this in. It doesn't make sense to have it in the oil slime prefab, but I was just playing around with this. Is it solid? That's definitely something that we would like here. We would say true. Durability. That's essentially the health or the life. I don't know what. Maybe we want to call it durability. Etc. So it could look like this. And then what we could do is run through all of the prefabs, and we could have this like script In that case, it would need to be a Lua script. I don't know if I like that or how that would work exactly. I guess that's okay. Or we could even have it be in C++. That could work as well. And it could, run through all the prefabs and, have this tile namespace set up or whatever with this data function or something. I don't know what we would want to do with this. And it basically just collects all the tile data and then generates a data file for us. Maybe we don't even have to do that. Maybe this could just happen at launch. It loads up all the tile data. It just runs this code. We don't have to worry about that asset pipeline dealio. I'm not sure. I kind of want to look at to see how expensive some of that stuff is. I'm sure running or loading up a binary file is faster than executing the script and pulling out the data. But it is like an extra step, so that kind of sucks. Also, I could do hot reloading in this case, which would be kind of cool. I'd like that. So yeah, I'm kind of thinking maybe we would do that where we just have like, if it's not a component, we don't go through prefab, we could go through these other tables as well or whatever. I mean, this is, yeah, a table basically with a function called data that has it being added in, and we could even like expose this tile. Like we mentioned this up here, like maybe this is just a tile namespace that we could call and it just adds a new thing to it. And then what we could also do is if this gets called while we are loading a prefab, maybe then it could like associate that ID with this ID or something like that, or I don't know exactly how we want to do that. Like this could return an ID, so we could say like local tile ID or something is equal to that, and then we could set it, or maybe we would just say prefab dot tile. I don't know if I like that. I guess we could do, yeah, I guess this is true. We could say prefab tile. Maybe this would work. And then what it does is it just adds it to the database. I kind of like this actually. This would add it to the database. And then it could also create the tile component and add it. So actually, yeah, this is good. This is good. So it, on the interface level, it looks like we're just adding a tile component, but actually in the code we're kind of doing that separation of putting all the static tile data into a database, and then we're just setting the tile ID to index that on the component. I like that. And so that tile ID is the same one that's used in the tile maps for the tile itself. Yeah. Nice. I think we have this all planned out now. It's been a lot of planning. This is a complex system, and I think it's definitely worth planning out. Like, we have it good now. I think honestly, with what we have planned, it shouldn't take that long to implement. I'm gonna save that though for tomorrow, since I don't want to start actually working on it right now. But I think another maybe like we'll probably spend a day setting up most of it, and then like maybe a day rendering it. We'll see. But it's going good. It's going good. Definitely off topic, but last night I played the new expansion for Binding of Isaac 4 Souls. Pretty awesome. I definitely recommend if you guys like board games, like this isn't this sounds like it's sponsored or something. It's not. If you guys like board games, if you like something like Munchkin, then Binding of Isaac 4 Souls is seriously like amazing. It's probably my favorite board game ever, and I've played lots of board games. It's amazing. Edmund McMillan is so good at designing games. So you can get it at Studio 71 Games. And it's like selling out, so you guys should probably buy it before it gets too late. This is the official website. This is where you would want to buy it. There are knockoffs on Amazon store, so you don't want to go there. So yeah, you can get the base game for $40. Pretty decent. They just came out with the expansion. I got it yesterday, and my brother and I played it last night. Kind of stayed up a little too late playing it. So you can get those. I kind of wish I got these dice. I might buy them, even though... yeah, I kind of want those dice. Not sponsored. Yeah. It's awesome, though. It's awesome. Favorite game, board game ever. So yeah. Check it out if you like board games. It's really fun. It's really fun. It's kind of like Munchkin, but not so swingy. Where like in Munchkin, if anyone's played it, it's basically like you are accumulating power and everything, and then whenever someone finally gets to like close to level 10, which is like the end of the game, whoever gets to level 10 first, everyone just nukes the first person trying to get to level 10, and then like the second person that's about to get to level 10, like the turn after, they're like, oh, I'm free, I win because I was in second place, not first. Like, it's actually best to be in second place. In Binding of Isaac, that doesn't happen. You are limited to like how many resources you can use, and you have to really be thinking about when you are using your resources, because there are limitations. And yeah, it's awesome. Check it out. So yeah. Anyways, I just thought I'd mention that before I leave because they are selling out, and it's worth picking up. But yeah, I'm going to call it a stream here and pick back up the tile map stuff tomorrow. I think we'll actually start implementing it now that we have things planned out, and I think make some decent progress on it. So I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, and I will see you guys then. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.